technique to bring your renders closer to the comic book look with cross-hatching and ink effects. So cross-hatching alphas and polypaint. After posting a few work in progress online when I was going to work on the tutorial, most of the common questions I would get about doing the cross-hatching effect. So this is why I decided to dedicate a whole section to it, even though the technique I used are pretty simple. There are two approaches that I found to be very effective. Sculpt the details, or deep crevices, and then polypaint using alphas. The first method, which is sculpting the actual cross-hatching on there, is good if you want certain scratches to always be visible and react to the changes in the matte caps and the light. The section option is probably less time consuming and give you great results. The disadvantage is that the little details you add will stick with the model. So if you just polypaint the cross-hatching on and you tilt it, it's going to stick with the model. So if it goes into an area that in a comic book style you probably wouldn't cross-hatch shading there, it's still going to show up, so you might have to repaint it. So it's a little bit more manual. This is something I would do after choosing a final angle for the render. So if you go ahead and just dial in, like, let's go ahead and go back to our, let's go ahead and delete all these. So we'll go delete all under our subtool menu here, and then we'll grab his Kepler bust. It's a little bit simpler. There we go. So we can kind of see it. It's not quite as busy as mine. So if you rotate or change the angle, they might not look ideal. This is something that I would do after choosing a final angle for render. So once it's all locked in and you've changed the angle, and if you want to, by the way, you can go up here. There's a couple different ways to save your camera angle. So we go in here to document, zap link properties. You can go through here. They can choose like, okay, I want to always go back to this angle here. So you can do a custom one, and then you can go through here and kind of change this. And then if you hit custom one again, it'll snap back. As well as if you go over here to the movie menu, you can go down here to timeline and you can do show. That'll show your timeline tracks. And now you can set multiple angles. So if we like this one, we can just click, and then we can move this over here. We can just click, and then we can move this down here and turn it around. And we can just click. And now when we go through here, you can use your arrow keys to cycle through these. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and go ahead and get those back. If you don't like these, just click and drag these off the timeline. And if you don't want to use your timeline, again, just go in here to the movie menu and just turn off show. So a couple different ways to save your camera views there. So choose your final angle, and then you can paint in your cross-hatching really quickly using alpha stamps. The only thing I'll say about the first approach, which is a sculpting one, is that the dam standard and pinch brush work great, and it's just a matter of patience and sculpting the details here. Let's go ahead and do that. So if we want to, let's go ahead. Is this the super shader? Let's see. Yeah, looks like we got that one selected. So with this one selected here, if you do go through here, we can use the standard brush or the dam standard brush, Damien standard here, and you can just kind of start. Let's see, we need to go in here, turn on Z sub, Damien standard, unmask. There we go, everything was masked. So now we can go through here and we can start just sculpting in the detail here. Let's go ahead and go back to the material here, turn on S3, and we'll tank S3 all the way up. And then we'll change our light direction effects, that one, S3. Let's change, let's do depth. Depth A and depth B, we'll turn that down just a little bit so it's not quite as intense. We want a little bit here. Okay, so now as we go through here, as I'm, let's go ahead and again, if you want this to be sculptable, probably decimating and dividing isn't the best bet, but you can go through here, and now you can just kind of go through here and use your Damien standard to sculpt in this detail maybe. So you can kind of do, you know, set up your camera view, you can just go through here, and you can kind of start adding your crosshatch lines. And if you hold down Alt, so if you know, go through here and we let it press in, or we hold down Alt and press it out, it might give you different effects depending on what angle of your model it's using, but it seems to be pretty consistent here. So you can kind of just go through here really quickly and just kind of sculpt in what you want to use here. With the other approach, choose the color of the outlines of the material. I assume it's black. Choose the standard brush and pick the drag rect from the stroke menu. So let's go ahead and do it this method as well. So you're going to see this one, since it's sculpted in, it's going to follow the model around. The next one is going to be just poly painted on, and that's going to be just using RGB information. So let's go ahead and make this here. We'll go ahead and turn colorize on, and we'll do color. Let's go back to white. RGB, color, fill object. And you know what, we'll do mRGB. There we go. So we're going to choose a black color here, and we'll pick drag rect from the stroke menu here. So we'll go back to our standard brush here. We'll go to freehand, we'll go to drag rect, and we'll just bring in the alpha of the crosshatches that we want to use. I've created and compiled a series of crosshatching alphas you can use in the resource folder, but feel free to create your own. Click on the alpha thumbnail and load any alpha you want. So in the alpha here, we can go to import, or we can also go in here to our light box here. Let's see if I have those loaded already. We don't. So what I'm going to do, just to make this a little bit easier, and we can also get a preview here, let's go ahead and do this really quick. So I'm going to go here to File Explorer, Streaming, Comic Rendering, Resources, and we have alphas. So here's all of our crosshatch alphas. So now for those, I'm going to throw those into ZBrush for our 8 Z alphas. There we go. And in here, we're going to go ahead and do a new folder. We'll just call it comic book. And we'll do select here, Control A, Control C, and then Control V. I'll go ahead and paste all those in there. One thing if I remember correctly, if I open this, let's just talk about this really quick because it's kind of important. So we're going to Photoshop here. A little bit more about Photoshop real quick. So if I take any one of these alphas in here, and I'm just going to drag this in. Okay. You're going to see it's in RGB mode. So if we go to image mode, what you're going to probably want to do is go to 16 bits per channel and then go to image mode, grayscale, discard any color information. So image mode, grayscale, 16-bit. And if you save that out, it'll load into ZBrush as an alpha by default when you double click it from the light box. For instance, so this JPEG here, in fact, I don't know if JPEGs will save out 16-bit. It might just have to be Photoshop. So we'll do 15 PSD. We'll go ahead and save that one. I'll show you the difference here. If you want to apply all of this to every single image, I think if you go to automate, batch, and you can make an action script that goes ahead and changes those settings, point it to this folder, and then just run a batch and save them all out as 16-bit grayscale. You can do that if you want to. So why that's important is, for instance, you can go in here to your lightbox here. So just hit the comic key, and then in our alphas, we now have a comic book one here. And you're going to know for 15, we have two different 15s. One is a PSD that's a grayscale 16-bit, and then one is a JPEG that's RGB. If we double-click this JPEG, it's going to throw it down here in our textures. We want it in our alphas. So what you have to do is go down here and go to make alpha, and then it'll throw in our alphas, and then you can just turn texture off. And if you want it to load into your alphas automatically, just again, make it a 16-bit grayscale, and then double-click this one, and that'll automatically throw it into your alpha section. So just a little bit of ease of use. What I think he's doing is just going in here to alpha import, and then if you go here to our streaming comic rendering resources, alphas, then you can go through here and you just kind of look through here. So you don't, if you load it in manually into the alpha, it'll go ahead and work. So we'll just go ahead and grab a bunch of these here. Let's control tap these ones here, and then go ahead and hit open, and that'll go ahead and load your alphas up like that. So if you want to bring them in from Lightbox, make sure they're 16-bit grayscale alphas. So anyway, back to our thing here. Click and drag over the model to project the cross-hatching and other line effects. We have black color selected, we have our alpha loaded, drag rect, and now when you just drag on our model, it'll go ahead and add that cross-hatching in there. And of course you can choose different alphas in here, whichever one you have selected here. We got that one selected, let's do this one. You can go through here and just, put in all sorts of cross-hatching lines that you want to. Now, of course, you don't have to, there's a bunch of different ways to do all this stuff too. If you want to do a standard brush with a dot stroke and maybe just like a pinpoint alpha here, you can just go in here and do RGB. You can just go in here and draw it. You can go in here to your lazy mouse and kind of crank that up here. Pinpoint might be a little bit strong. Let's try this one and turn our focal shift down. So go in here and kind of play with your brush settings and see if you can't. Oh, you know what? They do actually have, you can kind of go through here. They actually have in here under the pen brush, so BP, they have paint, pen A. So they do have pen brushes in here, so you can kind of go through here and just kind of use these brushes here if you want to kind of just do some manual cross-hatching in here. Just kind of go through and just kind of paint. And then if you kind of use these two, you can kind of let it bleed on your object and do a little bit of like pen and ink here. So definitely check those out. The BP, that'll get your pen brush. So here's pen shader. You can kind of try that. And you can go through here and just kind of in ZBrush, in real time, go through here and kind of use your pen brushes to kind of dictate a little bit more of that. If we want to clear our canvas here, we can go back up to white, RGB selected, color, fill object, and it's RGB of 42. So we go up to 100. That'll go ahead and clear that off there. Unmask, there we go, color, fill object, there we go. And now we're back where we started, and then we can go back to our standard brush here, drag rect, again, bring in any of these alphas that you want to, and then you can just go back to a black color, and then you can just drag on these cross-hatching wherever you think you might need it. You can also use the alpha Z-add or Z-sub to actually sculpt the effects, and that way you can use the best of both worlds. Not my favorite, but you can do that if you want to. So if we turn off RGB and do Z-add, now you can use these alphas. You can hold down Alt, and you can kind of just sculpt in these crosshatch details. The rake could be useful too, absolutely, yeah. So the brush, that's a good point. Brush, BR, brush rake is a good way when we were talking about doing kind of putting in those cross hatching. You can sculpt it in, or we can just turn on RGB for this one, and we'll go to color, fill, and then we'll go back to black, and now you can kind of sculpt in some cross hatching here. So kind of, yeah, rake's a good one. Thank you.